One thing we haven't talked a great deal about since the election is climate change. The president-elect has said that he's going to get us out of any bad treaties. That would be a good place to start. May not be as simple as it sounds. A lot of people are suggesting that rolling that back might be a little bit of a challenge. We're joined right now by Phil Kerpen. He's the president of American Commitment. Phil, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for giving us some time today. Tell us a little bit about your organization.
We're a national free market advocacy group. We work on taxes, spending, healthcare, energy, technology policy, and regulatory reform. What we do, it's a little bit different from some of the other groups, is we don't do any of those 10, 20-page papers. Everything we put out is very short and to the point. We always have our sourcing and our facts, but we try to tell you what's happening in a 200-word email or a 600-word column or a 1-minute video so you can understand what the issues are that are on the margin in Washington and be a more active, effective, engaged citizen. We've got a lot of model letters into regulatory agencies or into Congress that you can send off as is or edit to your liking, and we try to make it easy for people to know the latest news on these issues and to do something about it. And so all of our stuff is on the web at americancommitment.org.
Very good. When it comes to climate change, this treaty that the president has committed us to, how easy or difficult will it be for Donald Trump to back away from that?
Well, it's pretty easy because it's a situation where, because President Obama negotiated an extraordinarily bad deal, and he knew that if he submitted it to the Senate as required by the U.S. Constitution, it would have gone down in flames. He never did. He simply asserted that the U.S. was a party to this agreement, and he submitted ratification documents to the United Nations, which, in my judgment, are fraudulent.
Right.
He misrepresented that we had ratified something that under our Constitution requires the advice and consent of the Senate. And so I think the new president has a couple of different options on how to deal with this, and I think some have more benefits than others. It's been suggested by some that he should announce that we are withdrawing from the agreement and trigger the withdrawal provisions of the agreement. I think that would be a mistake because, number one, it would accept that we were legitimately members in the first place, that President Obama's lawless actions, in fact, had made us members, and now we are withdrawing from that membership. I think that would be a terrible precedent to set. But number two, the withdrawal is a 4-year process, and so we would still be subject to the agreement for 4 years until the withdrawal takes legal effect. I would suggest that the way that President Trump should handle this is not to announce that we are withdrawing, but rather to announce we were never a party to it. And I would send a letter to the United Nations apologizing for the erroneous message sent by the last president, which incorrectly indicated that we were a party to the agreement, because under the United States Constitution, we can only ratify such an agreement with a 2/3 vote of the Senate offering its advice and consent, and that has not happened. And then what I would do, and that alone I think would solve the problem and send a pretty good signal, but I would actually go one step further. If I were President Trump, I would say, and in order to demonstrate to the world that this is not an agreement that is supported by the mainstream of American politics, I will in fact submit it to the Senate and ask that they vote on it and reject it. And I think he could be fully confident that they would reject it because it requires 67 votes in a body that only has 48 Democrats. But I actually think it might only get 25 or 30 votes because all these Democrats who are up for re-election don't want to vote for an agreement that lets China build 1,000 coal plants while we ban them in the U.S., and that's exactly what Obama agreed to. And so I would love to see the Senate put on record by having an actual vote, which, by the way, is the way that this is supposed to work under the Constitution. Obama just refused to do it.
Yeah, we're talking to Phil Kerpen from American Commitment. It's been a while since this thing was talked about, and I would just want people to understand, it's not just about us not being able to build coal-fired power plants in the U.S. while China and India continue to pump them out. It would actually, I've often argued that this is nothing more than a method to transfer wealth to third world countries. So it would cost American taxpayers $100 billion by 2020 if this thing stays in force. There's
something called the Green Climate Fund that is created by the Paris Treaty, And you're absolutely correct. U.S. taxpayers under President Obama's agreement are committed to paying $100 billion in climate-related foreign aid under this. So not only do we cripple ourselves economically by forcing draconian emissions reductions, at the same time the rest of the world basically gets a free ride. They have no meaningful reductions, but we are then, to add insult to injury, forced to pony up an enormous amount of tax dollars as well. There's no way you could negotiate a worse deal than this. If you were trying to go in there and negotiate the worst possible deal, you would end up with something like this.
Well,
So this really is sort of the perfect example of what Trump was talking about how our leaders are dumb when we sit down on these negotiations. It's incredible.
Phil Kerpen, I hope that Donald Trump is that he's on your email list, because somebody in the White House needs to. I hope they have as deep an understanding about this as you do.
I think some of their staff are. I don't
Good.
think Mr. Trump himself is, but I do know that there's some people over there that see us.
What is your, since you look at a lot of issues, including the economy, what is your reaction to Steve Mnuchin and his comments yesterday that they're going to reduce regulations and they're going to cut these corporate taxes and they're going to try to get some real tax reform?
I'm very excited about the prospect of meaningful tax reform and major regulatory overhaul. I totally agree with his comments that if we fix the big policy drags that we've had on the economy for the past 8 years, we can get back to 3-4% growth. There's no reason we can't get back to the historical post-war norms in economic growth, or even higher, back to the Reagan-type booming growth, if we get the basics right in terms of government policy. And that will make a huge difference to finally get incomes rising again. And so I'm pretty excited about the economic agenda overall. And I'm sure we're going to disagree with some things, and we'll disagree when we disagree. But on the whole, we're pretty excited about what the new economic agenda looks like with this administration.
Outstanding. Phil Kerpen, I'll direct people to your website, AmericanCommitment.org. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
You too.